All right, let's learn everything there is to learn about oil because it's been in the news lately. Um, so the world produces about 100 million barrels per day of oil, MBPD. And the world consumes about 103 million barrels, about the same amount. What is a barrel? A barrel is 42 gallons or 159 liters. Why is it called that? Because some fools in the 1860s in Pennsylvania, when they invented or produced oil there or something like that, or dug it out of the ground for the first time, or maybe they're the early dudes who did it. They put it in some barrel, and that barrel held like 42 gallons, and they weighed roughly 300 pounds, and that's like how much it was like ideal size for a person to handle. So that's why a barrel is 42 gallons. Anyways, so the world produces 100 million barrels and uses about 100 million barrels per day. Cool. So where is that all that oil coming from? So first we'll look at this thing called the reserves. Each country has some oil reserves, and these are the countries with the most oil. Venezuela has the most, about 300 billion barrels. Remember, the daily production and consumption is in 100 million. The reserves is 300 billion, and 1 billion is 1,000 times more than a million. Anyways, so this is what Venezuela has. Saudi Arabia has about the same. Canada has quite a bit. Iran, Iraq, Russia, etc. The USA has some also. This is oil under the ground that has not been dug up. And as noted, Venezuela is an anomaly. It has a bunch of oil, but due to decaying infrastructure, they can't get that oil out of the ground. They can't process it. It sucks. So with all that oil in the ground, and based on how much we're producing, digging it up, and consuming and using it daily, how many days of oil do we have left to use? Well, according to the above, we have enough oil to use until about 2075. So like about 50 more years at the current rate we're using it today. Now, as we use more green energy and renewables like wind, solar, and nuclear, we're going to use less oil, and so we're going to have oil around for longer as we use less of it, and it'll like taper off or something like that. Now, so what we just talked about was oil reserves. There's this other thing called strategic reserves or strategic petroleum reserves, SPR. And this is what like a country has already dug out of the ground and put in storage for emergencies, basically. And this is in the hundreds of millions of barrels, whereas the reserves themselves are in hundreds of billions of barrels under the ground. The strategic petroleum reserves, SPRs, are in hundreds of millions of barrels. Europe has about 450. China has like 420. China has quite a bit. The US has quite a bit, 370, and then Japan, South Korea, etc. Is SPR are these strategic reserves ready to be used immediately? Usually, no. So they hold unrefined crude oil, and we're going to talk about what exactly crude oil is later. They hold unrefined crude oil. That's basically the stuff that's coming out of the ground. And if a crisis hits, this crude must be sent to a refinery. It needs to be refined. Some European nations mandate a portion of their reserves to be held as refined, ready to go products like natural gas or LNG or something like that, or like gasoline, stuff like that. Quick caveat: the difference between like natural gas and LNG. So gas is a methane. It is gas. It can be piped directly to a power plant and just set on fire, like on the stovetop. LNG is a gas that is super cooled, like very cold, to become a liquid. So that's what the L is, the liquefied natural gas, and it's under a lot of pressure. It's very cold, and it's like shipped around the world in these like crazy tankers that is like storing this high pressure, very cold stuff. Yeah, cool. So that's the strategic reserves. Now, how much is the global like production and consumption by country? Some of the big players. The U.S., of course, we are the big daddy consumers of the world. We also produce a lot of the oil. So we're producing and consuming about 20 million barrels per day. China doesn't produce that much oil. They consume a bunch. And they consume second to the U.S. That kind of makes sense. They have like the second biggest economy. Saudi Arabia produces a lot. It doesn't consume as much. Similar with Russia, Canada, Iraq, Venezuela, etc. Um, so, what is actually a barrel of crude oil? Well, it's a lot of things actually. So, a single barrel of crude oil becomes when it's once it's refined. So, I think when people say a barrel of crude or oil is the same thing as crude oil. It's just this extracted thing from the ground, crude oil. Um, but it becomes 45% of it becomes gas. Um, 29% of it becomes diesel. 11% of it becomes like uh, petrochemical feeds, and then 9% becomes jet fuel, and then 6% becomes other. I think this 45% becomes gas and naphtha, which together with like petrochemicals, these are the building blocks of plastics, which is pretty interesting. Plastics, synthetic rubbers, and fertilizers. So yeah, a lot comes from gas, like plastics, microplastics, from oil. I mean, yeah, that's great. Um, some and then basically for consumption, for how that oil is consumed, this kind of lines up just exactly how it's produced or what's in a barrel. So like the world then uses like what's in a barrel, like 44% of the oil usage goes to just light transport like gasoline. About a third or 29% goes to heavy transport diesel, kind of like what comes out of the barrel, and then the plastic stuff, the synthetic stuff, and then aviation, and then like um, other industrial stuff. So that's kind of like how it's processed and how it's used. A note about the type of oil that comes out of the ground from different places. There's this thing, I guess oil is kind of rated as it comes out of the ground by its sulfur content. So when it is, there's a thing known as sweet crude oil, which has less sulfur, and it's more valuable because it's like not as thick, I guess, and it doesn't need as much refinement or processing to make it these to turn it into these useful products. And then there is sour crude, which is thicker, and it requires like more complex refineries. Um, there's two kind of price benchmarks of how crude oil is traded. There's this thing known as WTI. I think it's like a stock ticker or something related to just stocks and pricing. Known as WTI West Texas Intermediate, that the U.S. produces a lot of this stuff. So yeah, USA. It's incredibly light and sweet. And then there's Brent crude. That's the global benchmark from the North Sea. The North Sea is somewhere near, like, I want to say Norway. Uh, where's the North Sea? It is somewhere here, like surrounding Russia, the UK, or whatever. Yeah, I guess. Anyways, and that's Brent. And the price is a little different because like the sweeter American stuff is probably more expensive, and then the Brent is a bit cheaper. But if one goes up in price, like because of a supply shock, the other probably will go up in price also, as we're seeing. Um, so we talked about oil, and now how does oil compare or with like all sorts of other energy usage. So like energy is not just oil. Energy is also like electricity or like power stations and power. And not only the energy, like, so oil is like the energy needed to move things, like a lot of times it's used for transportation. But energy also includes like just generating electricity. So worldwide, oil, I think this is actually mainly like in terms of like gas, like transportation oil, takes up about a third of the world's energy. And then the other part of like electricity generation comes from like natural gas, nuclear energy, renewables, and also coal. But oil is about a third. Um, the U.S. Is kind of like that. The U.S. doesn't use as much coal, which is great because coal is like the worst and very dirty. It's just bad for everyone's health, bad for the environment. China, interestingly, uses a lot of coal still, but they do have a lot of dams. They have a lot of hydro renewables, and they also use oil, non surprisingly. I think Taiwan, similarly, they for example have a lot of they use a lot of natural gas to produce electricity, and they also use coal. France is interesting because they have a lot of nuclear, and they used to have a lot more, but then like Fukushima like scared them and made them like wuss out, and they used less nuclear, or they started depending less on nuclear and more on like natural gas, which is kind of imported from Russia, and that's why like Trump was kind of shitting on France about that or Europe about that. Anyways, um, uh, nuclear is generally good. It's a good thing because it produces a lot of electricity. It produces a lot of power. Despite how much we see, like how much like solar farms and wind turbines and all these things, it still can't quite compare to how like powerful nuclear is. And I think most experts would agree or would say that we basically need more nuclear power generation. I think one another interesting note here is Venezuela actually has a lot of hydro renewables. They have a lot of dams. They don't consume a lot of power. They're a smaller nation, but they have a lot of dams. Most of their power comes from like hydro and renewables, which is pretty cool. Um, yeah. This chart is kind of cool and interesting. It just gives another slice of another way of visualizing things. So on these axes, we can see the oil production, the oil consumption, and the oil reserves. So, for example, this nation here, China, on the production axis, it's producing not very much, like 4 or whatever million barrels per day. On the consumption side, it's kind of high. I don't know why this axis starts like it's small and bigger here, but anyways, it's kind of big here, so it's consuming this. And then in terms of reserves, on the z-axis, it doesn't have that many, so it's like kind of low there. This is the U.S. It's consuming quite a bit at a 20, and it's producing quite a bit also at a 20, and it's got some reserves. It's got like whatever the number was, yeah, 68 million billion barrels, or yeah, billion reserves are in billion. This is Russia. It doesn't consume that much. I guess they're more, environmental. They're less, capitalistic. Don't consume as much. They produce a decent amount, and they have more reserves than the U.S. This is Saudi Arabia. They really don't consume much. They do their producing, and they have a lot of reserves. And this guy right here is Venezuela, this outlier. They don't consume much, they don't produce much, but they're just sitting on a ton of oil. They have a lot of reserves, as we talked about, so they're way up there. It's very interesting. Um, Now, a note about American oil, like the United States of America. Like it's kind of weird that America is now basically exporting oil, but it also still imports oil. Like what the f? Like why is it doing that? And the reason is because back in the day, basically, the U.S. mainly before the invention of fracking, the U.S. mainly imported crude oil, like sour-ish crude oil that needed a lot of refining. And the sour crude oil mainly came from the Middle East, so it needed a lot of refining. And this is kind of a rough map of what's going on. Like from the East Coast, it's like being imported, and then it gets piped or something like that, and then it gets refined. Um, and then on the Gulf Coast, it's like drilled, and it's also drilled in the Midwest. And then it gets refined and then like imported or shipped out or something. This is kind of just generally a map of these PADs, PADD, PAD regions. A PAD is a Petroleum Administration for Defense Districts. It's the first time I ever heard this, but that's pretty cool. I guess the U.S. government came up with this terminology. Um, yeah. Anyways, these are kind of the regions. Kind of a goofy map of the U.S. Um, but after the U.S. invented fracking, it started just digging up a lot of oil from the ground, and this oil was sweet crude oil. But its refineries mainly just refined heavy crude oil and turned that into gasoline for the U.S. to use and to export. So the U.S. continues to do that. So, for example, it it looks like on the supply side, it's digging up like 20 million barrels a day of crude oil, and then it's also importing crude oil, and then it's also importing some refined oil, and then on the like output side, it consumes most of what it refined. That makes sense. And then it exports its sweet crude oil. So it imports the heavy stuff that it can refine, and it refines it to use for gasoline because the refineries are like just very hard to, I guess, change up. They're very expensive, like Exxon and Chevron or whatever. These they used to be like the largest mega cap, largest countries, largest companies of the world like 10 years ago, 10, 20 years ago before tech took over. And these refineries are hard to like change up. So they still mainly the U.S. still mainly refines heavy crude oil, but it exports sweet crude oil. Um, and yeah, so I guess it's exporting the crude oil. It's also exporting some of the refined stuff. And then there's this weird little thing here where I guess it's this thing says volume expansion, which this thing explains as it's the physical act of refining expands the volume of liquid, adding roughly 1.5 million barrels a day of new volume to the output side of the balance sheet. Um, so I guess this is like maybe in terms of like when you refine the heavy, thick, sour crude oil, and it becomes gas. The gas is cleaner and lighter and not as dense. It's like fat gas or something. There's more volume. It gains in some volume. Yeah, I guess that's that. Anyways, here is a look at the pump, what kind of we experience as consumers of gas. This is the cost per gallon. The U.S. averages here. This is before the war where Iran and the U.S. bombed the shit out of. Sorry, Israel and the U.S. bombed the shit out of Iran and vice versa, and the oil prices skyrocketed. Skyrocketed. This is before all that. Um, so the cost of gas was 3.5 gallons, $3.5 per gallon for the U.S. average. And then here's some other countries like Argentina, Taiwan, Brazil, China, Turkey, Japan, India, Mexico, and then California, which is also the U.S. But California loves its clean air, or attempts at clean air, and so its gas is like so expensive. Like between California and the average U.S., there's like 10 other countries where the gas price is in between those two. Like wow. And then the UK and Germany has some of the highest gasoline prices. $7.50 per gallon. And then the heavy oil producing countries, I guess Saudi Arabia, Iran, Venezuela, it's much cheaper. Um, the in a percentage wise, I guess if the U.S. average is like 3.5%, to $3.50. This is how it stacks up. Germany's is like more than double the price. California is like 37% higher. And then all of these countries are like cheaper than California, but more expensive than the US average. Um, yeah. One last note Germany and the UK, they have, they have, their gas is so expensive because they apply massive carbon, road usage, and value added taxes at the pump. So it's like they're like fucking over the drivers so that the people taking public transportation and bicycling can have better roads and better trains. Whereas in the U.S., that's not the case. Yeah, and that's all I have to share about oil. Hope we learned something.